that's one of the things I think about often is like um, you get people that are big time evangelists of certain strategies. Project-based learning is a great example. And they'll say our whole school needs to be project-based learning, or everything we do needs to be PBL, and it has to be this process, and they get very focused on fidelity. And I'm kind of like, or we can do little mini projects and design challenges and things like that too. Like those work really well. Like we can find easy small wins that work.
Hey, welcome back to the Tech Ed Clubhouse Podcast. Today, I am joined by Dr. John Spencer, who is, like myself, a recovering middle school teacher, current college professor, a best-selling author of books that really hit home for me: Launch, Empower, Vintage Innovation, among others. He's a leading voice in helping educators move students from compliance to ownership, which, if you've been a listener of the Tech Ed Clubhouse Podcast, you know that's what we do here about engagement and design thinking and all kinds of stuff like that. John, welcome to the show, and tell us, what else is going on with you and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So glad to be here. Like you said, I was a middle school teacher for 12 years. I started out with social studies actually and reading intervention, and then I taught all subjects. And that's where I really got to see how a lot of the pedagogy connects to each other, a lot of the overlap between subject areas, kind of moving out of siloed subjects and into this like notion of interconnectedness. And then for the last 3 years in the classroom, I taught STEM, like you said, that's similar, right? So I
Right.
STEM and photojournalism, and we had a makerspace slash studio. It was a really cool space. It was a really cool just area for creativity. I had a lot of autonomy, and I just loved it. And then, yeah, for the last, I guess I'm almost done with my 11th year at the university level. So it's been a while, at the university level working with pre-service teachers, and then also people getting masters in education, and now a little bit more doctoral students too. So yeah, that's my story.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I can equate to a lot of that stuff, but let's dig into that pre-service teachers right now, because I think a little bit of are you seeing things? Are you doing things different? Are you seeing some different things coming through with your pre-service teachers that are different than like when you went to get your teaching degree?
Yeah, I mean, I really think the kind of person that becomes a teacher is the same, right? So, like, on some level,
Yes.
there's this universal people who want to make a difference, people who care about the subject that they teach, but then also care about their students. So, I think the type of teacher hasn't really changed that much. Like, that piece is pretty consistent, but the context has changed a lot. And the context changing involves younger teachers who just grew up in No Child Left Behind. They grew up in standardized tests. They grew up with this sort of testing culture. And so I think there's always the assumption of, younger equals more creative, or younger equals more innovative, but the reality is everyone's going to teach to a certain extent the way that they were taught. And so you do see a number of younger teachers who just haven't seen a different approach to learning beyond prepping for tests, which is really interesting. And then on top of that, I think the context has changed with students, right? We see a distraction epidemic. We see kids struggling with resilience. We see some extreme behaviors. And kids on some level are always going to be kids, right? They haven't changed, but the context has changed. So I think the exciting thing is adapting to this new context and saying, what does deeper learning look like in this current era? And I love that challenge. And I love bringing teachers on board. I love getting to model lessons with them in their classrooms and show, hey, it didn't work perfectly, but it did work better than blank. Or hey, let's talk about how to work through it. And so it's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, that's got to be interesting to see those, see kind of in the adult version of it, to see some lights come on versus, like when we were in seventh grade and we're working with our 12-year-olds, and everything should be a little bit of wonder with them.
Uh-huh. Definitely. Yeah.
Because you're gonna impact, hundreds of students because you got hundreds of students, or you're multiplying that out there. So that's awesome. So what are you teaching when you're at the collegiate level? What are you what are the classes you're kind of teaching up?
So my main focus tends to be on the tech side and like authentic learning, I would say. Um, I teach a class on educational technology. I teach a class that's specifically about AI integration and how, like, what does ethical AI integration look like? And then I have an elective class related to project-based learning. And then on top of that, it's just I kind of get to teach everything. I get a mix of class. When I do speaking and consulting, I tend to have certain areas, student-centered learning or design thinking or, AI, those types of things. But at the university level, I get to teach things that I never do with teachers in a workshop. I'm teaching a classroom management class right now, or I get to teach, an assessment class, a lesson planning class, certain classes like that you just get this broad variety, which is a lot of fun to get to teach. I guess it keeps it from getting boring, right? Like it keeps
Absolutely.
it from getting stagnant. So I kind of teach everything, which has been fun. And then this year, the last 2 years, actually, um, I've started to get to do things like dissertation advising, and that's also been a lot of fun to kind of stay up to date on research in areas that I'm not an expert on, right? So it could be, I don't know, trauma-informed pedagogy. That's not my wheelhouse, but I love learning about it. It was fascinating.
You mentioned in there a couple things, and just one, I want to relate a story to you. As a college professor, I went to school in the late 1900s to become a teacher, back when it was going from industrial arts to technology education. And you
Yeah.
mentioned lesson planning. And I tell people this story when I speak at conferences, and I think you'll appreciate this. Literally, my lesson planning was my professor handed me a piece of paper and he said, "This is a lesson plan."
Mm.
And that was the extent of my lesson planning in
Oh,
pre-service teaching. I mean, but again, it was an older guy. It was back to that hands-on stuff. We built
yeah.
things. We ran machines. We fired clay.
Yeah.
Back in the day, my diploma still says industrial arts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was at that changeover time.
That's so
So,
interesting.
you mentioned authentic education. Yeah, I know there's a lot of definitions of what authentic education is. What is John Spencer's definition of authentic education?
I think it is, when the education meets the context of the person and the world, right? Like, so some authentic learning is traditional, right? And some
Yeah,
is cutting edge. Some is, is it authentic to take a standardized test? Yeah, because we do that in life. Like you don't learn how to drive without passing the driver's test. Like, so there is authenticity isn't a rejection of XYZ. It's making sure that the context fits what you're learning. And a lot of times, I mean, my bias is a lot of authentic learning is design thinking, project-based learning, problem-based, inquiry-based. But it also includes meaningful lectures and good recall and making sure that the learning is brain-based. Um, the metaphor I used in the book Empower that I co-wrote was that the ladders become a maze, right? So for years we got this formula: work hard at school, graduate from college, climb the corporate ladder. But given all of the social, political, economic, technological changes, our students won't climb a corporate ladder. They're going to navigate a complex maze. And so authentic learning is like what prepares them for that maze? Like what are those competencies that they need to navigate that? And so I think authenticity is all about making sure it's real to them in a way that preps them for that uncertain future.
yeah, and I think that's kind of the difference between today's students and the students that maybe you and I started with when we
Mhm.
entered the classroom as middle school teachers. I think that's the big difference is the authenticity to them versus when, I went to school in the late 1900s,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean,
I taught for 32 years. I'm 55 years old.
yeah.
It was different. We did things because that's what we were supposed to do. Now kids today want to know why. Do you
Mm,
see that?
yeah, for sure. And I think some of it is, it's a mixed bag. I understand the struggles that teachers are going through right now, and they're
Yeah.
real, At the same time, when they have that deeper rationale that goes beyond just the grades, right? It is sometimes mind-blowing how hard they'll work and how into it they'll be. I see all of these amazing glimmers of hope. I see maker spaces where kids are completely resilient. It might not be transferring to their AP calculus class, unfortunately. Like we want that resilience to be happening everywhere, but then sometimes it does, right? And that's really exciting. I coach mock trial and I see students focusing for hours on
Mhm.
problem solving and challenges and memorizing scripts and doing these things. I see amazing spaces in in everything from theater programs to sports to again, so like there's a lot of really cool moments that you can look for and say, where are students engaging in deep collaboration? Where are they problem solving? Where are they learning these types of things? And that's where I find myself really hopeful. I don't know if that answered your question, but like I think like there has to be that deeper sense of relevance and meaning for them beyond I'm just doing this to make my parents happy. And I say that partly because I empathize with kids. This is the first generation where they're scared of the future. Like I mean, we're a similar age, right? I'm a little bit younger, but not crazy younger. Um, we came of age at the end of the Cold War, right?
Yeah.
Everything was hopeful, everything was getting better, and there was a sense that anyone could buy a home. There were jobs. There were like we were excited. We were the generation where like they had to say on the news, like, "Do you know where your children are?" Right? Because it's 10 o'clock at night. We were independent, fiercely independent. We were excited about the future. We were a little bit cynical because of Gen X, right? But we were
Absolutely.
also
Still am.
absolutely. But there was a sense of like, okay. And I empathize with students who are looking into this very uncertain future and they're rightfully asking why. Like I get it.
Yeah. And I got a couple of kids. My kids are 28 and 24, and
Yeah.
they're growing up in this, right? And being so close to being removed from the classroom.
Uh-huh.
I really kind of took that to heart, right? I really
Yeah.
kind of like what you just said, which I don't think a lot of teachers really kind of take into account that, these kids are the same, but they're different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you watch The Breakfast Club and you walk down a high school hallway, you're going to see the same kids,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
you know,
That's so true.
um, but they're going to do something because it means something to them.
I'm curious for you, like just hearing you say that, because you had this whole evolution as a teacher, right? And then you
Yeah.
retired. Um, how would you say kids have changed in the last 3 decades? Like what are the big changes that you've seen?
Well, I think the kids, this is, way to turn the tables there, by the
No,
way.
that's
That's
fine. No,
awesome.
I'm curious.
I love it. I love it. But again, it's that they want to know the reason behind doing it. It's not that they don't want to do the work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but they want to know why it's relevant to them in their
Hmm.
situation, right? I think, and I think that with AI coming in the past 3 years, that helped. I
Hmm.
think that helps a teacher, and we can dig into that a little bit.
Hmm.
But I think that it's gone away from the I'm doing this because mom and dad,
Yeah.
want me to, or this is what Mrs. Smith, my English teacher, wants me to write. To
Uh,
why am I writing this? Like, and I think in this time too, John, like right now, this is where I get a little frustrated here with some social media posts, because now I'm going to
uh,
start seeing things on social media where it says, "Hey, I'm glad I learned the Pythagorean theorem instead of how to do my taxes."
uh-huh.
Right now,
Yeah.
that gets me a little upset
Yeah.
because I build things. I'm a STEM teacher, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I build things. I use the Pythagorean theorem all the time, building a deck,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
You're a STEM teacher. You get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can equally put out there, hey, I'm Mark safe from writing a haiku this week. I'm glad I learned how to write a haiku. And again, there's a reason to do some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, like, um, the metaphor that I always liked, and it's so cliche at this point, but I like it is, you know, when we learn to think in all of these different ways, it becomes
Yeah.
a set of tools that we use, right? But those same people that say, you know, uh, glad I learned the Pythagorean theorem, blank XYZ taxes, those same people would never say, I'm glad I learned how to bench press. It's going to really come in handy today when I'm being paid to bench press, or being asked to bench press, or like nobody says, "Hey, today I'm so glad that I've been doing squats because for the first time ever I was handed something really heavy and I had to repeatedly lift it up and down with the perfect position." You don't say that. You say, "Oh, hey, I lifted a couch." Like I had this thought the other day where I was like, I like in my mid 40s, late 40s, somewhere between, I was able to carry a couch along with, two adult children, right? So my kids are boys are 21 and 18, right? Um, Stairs, and I was like, glad I lift weights, right? Like,
Right.
bottom line is it's the same kind of thing at a mental level, and I think um when I hear those types of things, what that tells me is that we collectively in education failed to provide the context of where we use things
Mhm.
and the rationale, right? The Pythagorean theorem is a great example. Like I've written about this before, so like this a bit of a repeat, but we were given the Pythagorean theorem as something to teach, and literally the word problem that my students had to solve was you're a catcher throwing someone out at second base. You know who doesn't use the Pythagorean theorem? Like Cal Raleigh, Buster Posey. Like no
Right.
catcher, he's retired anyway, but no catcher is using the Pythagorean theorem. Now I rewrote the problem to be authentic and still about baseball, and I made it all about, you've been accused of cheating. I didn't tell them to use the Pythagorean theorem. They had to demonstrate that you didn't cheat, right? So I fixed it. But the reality is, when have you used the Pythagorean theorem? And the answer is, for me, it was in rebuilding a deck, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you do use the Pythagorean theorem. Like people who say I never use the Pythagorean theorem, I'm like, well, I guess you haven't been doing home improvement projects, or you're not.
Right.
Some of
To
it
your
is context. Yeah.
argument there too, John, right? It's you got to be well-rounded, right? You still have
Yeah.
to learn these things. You still have to
Mhm.
learn to write. You still have to learn
Yeah.
to read. You still have to learn to put pen to paper,
Uh-huh.
right? Or type or whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
not worthless, right?
Yeah.
Worksheets aren't worthless. Standardized tests aren't worthless, but they
Yeah.
have a time and a place.
They have a time and a place. And then when you're learning things where the context is really hard, like I remember taking pre-calculus and learning matrices, and I wish someone had told me A, when we use matrices in life, but also B, what the thinking skill is of doing matrices. Because like I also learned how to do trigonometric proofs, and I was like, I'm never going to use it, but I had a teacher explain this is how you learn deep mathematical thinking and reasoning, and that math is not memorizing procedures, it's understanding things at a deep, profound level. Now, people still sometimes hated those, but the act of learning how to do a proof, oh my gosh, it helped me in philosophy, right? It helped me in history. It helped me, and I had this amazing teacher who explained why we were doing trigonometric proofs, and it clicked for me. Like it was like, oh, I
Right.
get it. And it kind of became fun at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. You're preaching to the choir on that one too, because that's kind of where I was in the seventh grade for 32 years. They finally let me out, but it's that whole piece of it's not the product that you're making, it's how you
Yeah.
get there. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's kind of your underlying
Yeah,
philosophy
I think
is
so. Yeah.
everything is, right now I think in education everything is so product based. Like what's the score on that test? What did I get on this essay? What did it, as opposed to how did you deduce that? And I'm actually working
Yeah.
on some things offline with that stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, is that kind of what your thinking process
Yeah.
is and what you're trying to get teachers to do?
I think so. And it's really building up the capacity in students to be able to be prepared for anything, to think, to think critically, to engage in collaboration. It's developing all of those things. When I taught STEM, we had a couple members of the school board who wanted the STEM class to be turned into a programming class. And they said, kids are going to need to learn how to program in the future. Everyone's going to have to be programmers. Now, I taught a coding and programming
Mhm.
unit and I loved it, right? It was the building blocks. It was a scratch video game project. It was
Absolutely.
awesome. I loved it. Some of the kids went on to learn how to code and took those classes in high school, which was great. But the obsession at the school board level was like preparing kids to be programmers. And we were a Title I school. We were low income. I get where we were coming from in terms of jobs. However, coding itself looks very different in the age of AI. Like it just looks very different. And so I look at it and it's the whole idea of like our goal isn't to prepare students for something, it's to prepare them for anything, right? And to prepare them for the future by empowering them in the present. And one of the things I think about is there's a one of my favorite books. It's not an education book, but I love it. Is have you ever read the book Range?
No.
Oh, it's great. Okay. So David Epstein is the author. I hope I'm not derailing your podcast by talking about this book. Okay. So everyone says you should find your niche and you should focus on the essentials and become really good at one thing. And what he argues is the opposite. He said what gives you a competitive advantage in whatever job you do is your range. And so I'm going to give a couple of examples of what I mean. One is sports, right? So in sports, take Michael Jordan. He was not the best three-point shooter ever. He was not the best defender ever. He never led the league in scoring. Like all of these categories, he was never number one. But you know what was interesting? He was top five in everything. He was a top five defender. I mean, in the playoffs, they would have him against the best guy on the other team on defense. And then he was amazing at assists. He would be number two in his team in assists, despite being the number one scorer on his team. He had range, and his range is what made him so good. Tom Brady was a great quarterback. I hate to admit it. I don't like it because
Hurts.
but he was he's a goat, right? He didn't have,
Yes.
he didn't have the strongest arm. He was not the most athletic, but he could read a defense. He made quick decisions. He was super accurate. He hit all of these zones of multiple areas where he was a top three. And that's in sports. In terms of life, we see it in the arts. Like Hamilton changed musicals. Lin-Manuel Miranda was not the greatest rapper, for sure. He was not necessarily the greatest writer in terms of people who write scripts for musicals. He's not the best performer. There's definitely better performers out there on Broadway. But his range of rap and performing and writing and all his massive range meant he created an epic, innovative new musical that took the world by storm, right? And I think about myself, I'm not the greatest artist, but I sketch everything. I make these sketch videos. I sketch like if you follow me on social media, if you see my YouTube, if you watch me present, I'm not the greatest presenter in terms of voice. People have told me that I speak slow or there's faster speakers or more polished or whatever. Um, but I've developed a range of someone who is super nerdy and reads, someone who does research, someone who enjoys writing, enjoys reading, enjoys drawing. has a lot of classroom experience at the K-12 level, but also has this university experience. I have range, right? And I get to live this really cool life because of the range I have, right? Because there are people who are better teachers, speakers, this writers, you name it, right?
Absolutely.
But you said absolutely too fast there. I'm teasing. But like there's people who are better in all of those zones. But there's no one else who's me, right?
Right.
And so one of the things I think about is when it comes to students, the upside of exposing them to a lot of ideas and having them take a lot of different courses in different zones and giving them multiple teaching strategies is they just develop this massive range that makes them adaptable and competitive in a really tough job market.
Yeah. And that's kind of the philosophy I took without, reading David Epstein's book, which I'm going to have to go get now,
It's really good. It's one of my favorite. I love
as
it.
well as a couple more of yours. I do have a couple of yours on my shelf too, which I bought a few years ago, which really changed how I taught in the classroom, by the
Thank
way.
you.
So there's that. But I would flat out tell my students that,
Hmm.
hey, you may never code again, you may never build a bridge again, you may never, do this or that or whatever it is we're doing it. But that's not the point. I didn't care, and I would tell them, I don't care what you make. I don't
Yeah.
care if it's a piece of junk when you're done. If you can
Hmm.
tell me what went into it, and you
Yeah.
can tell me why you did it this way,
Hmm.
because I think, and I'd like
Yeah.
your thought on this. In the age of AI and phones and devices everywhere,
Hmm.
I don't think knowledge is as big a premium as it was when we went to school in the late 1900s.
Right,
Now
right.
it's those skills you talked about, the collaboration, the
Hmm.
communication, the critical
Yeah.
thinking, which, and I would, again, thoughts on this. We're not going to walk into a classroom. You're not going to tell one of your pre-service teachers to go in and say, hey, do a lesson on collaboration today, right?
Yeah, you and do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So those things got to be built in, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean they're the building blocks of how we teach, right? They're what we incorporate on a daily basis. And one of the upsides of it is like a lot of those things are small tweaks that we can,
Yes.
right? It's adding a couple choices to your warm up. It's doing a quick Kagan structure, think, pair, share, time share, like those types of activities. It's doing a 30-minute design challenge that's hands-on that gets them to
Yes.
understand proportional reasoning. It is that's one of the things I think about often is like um you get people that are big time evangelists of certain strategies. Project-based learning is a great example. And they'll say, we need to have our whole school needs to be project-based learning, or everything we do needs to be PBL. And it has to be this process, and they get very focused on fidelity. And I'm kind of like, or we can do little mini projects and design challenges and things like that too. Like those work really well. Like we can find easy small wins that work. And I think, I'm sure you see it coming from your STEM background. Like there was often this obsession with how do we integrate more reading and writing into the electives, right? Drove me crazy because sometimes I would be like, can we talk about how to learn from PE and add more movement into the classroom on a regular basis? Or the way that they do grading as performance assessments, it's amazing. Could we talk about how to like what we can learn from the way that collaboration is happening in the music class? Can we please integrate the problem solving and small hands-on prototyping we get in a class and just integrate that into science and math as well. Like, I sometimes looked at these amazing elective classes where, by the way, kids were excited to be there, right? In those classes. And it was like, what if, call me crazy, but like, what if we integrated some of that into the so-called core classes? I think it would have made all the difference.
Oh my God, that is exactly spot on to the way I've been thinking lately.
Yeah.
I went to the FETC conference back in Orlando in January, John,
Mhm.
and I
Uh-huh.
had that same epiphany of like, you know, why can't we do that? And it's not throwing out like everything you're doing as a social studies
No.
teacher, as an English teacher. It's
No.
like take 5 minutes at the beginning of class and do a little bit open-ended warm-up activity as
Yeah.
opposed to, you know, starting with your lecture.
Well, it was like we did Maker Monday, which was like a small, it was these were these little design thinking STEM challenges every Monday, and they were often rapid prototyping, they were divergent thinking, and I would pull a card and literally like the card was the limitation. And so I'd say like for the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you can't speak to each other. Or for the next 5, 10 minutes, I'm literally going to change groups and you're going to have to go move to a different
Mhm.
group and participate with them. Um, and it was done in a style that was very frantic and manic and crazy and chaotic,
Absolutely.
loud and all of that. Um, and we started, this is when I taught self-contained, so all subjects. We started and they were eighth graders, and we started every Monday out that way. And it was 35 minutes to 40 minutes every Monday morning. And my principal had to fight to let me do this, right? He was like, because they were all about bell to bell teaching, and that those are 40 minutes you could be teaching math or reading instruction or whatever. And in the meantime, we did a chunk of high interest silent reading and all of that. The bottom line was we did this once a week. And the net result of that was I charted it out. We had lower absentee rates on Monday and lower tardiness. Because when are kids, eighth grade students, most likely to be absent or late? Monday morning, right? And so literally you're like, this is the best way to start our Mondays. It primes you, it gets you going. It's a STEM challenge. It's what we did in STEM class. Like years
Yes.
later, it's what we did in STEM class. But it was like it was a small thing and but I had to have a principal support me on this because if someone from the district office came in, right, the clipboard crew that would check to see your objectives,
Yep.
they would see chaos. And in the meantime, I'm sure they'd be scratching their heads going, John has the highest math and reading scores in the district. What's going on? Because we just walked in on Monday morning and saw chaos, right? But the reality is we need we need that kind of stuff. And what I saw was because we were a K-8, what I saw was kids getting to do some of that in K3, less of that in 4-5,
Mhm.
none of that in 6-8, right? Like I just watched. So as they get older, where they need things actually to be more hands-on, they need more body autonomy, they need more movement. Like their body, they have this huge drive to be creative in middle school, and suddenly it
They
just
take
drives.
it.
They take it away. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I started my class every day with a 5 minute Lego build. I had Lego
Yeah.
bricks on my tables
Why not?
all the
Yeah.
time, and the kids could go and play with them whenever they wanted, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you, as a 12-year-old, you just need a break. Sometimes as a 55-year-old, you just need a break.
My gosh. Yeah.
So we would start with stupid little things like build me a chicken, build me a pumpkin, build me a heart, build me something that doesn't fly, right? And it's
I love
just
it.
that little bit of hands-on because you're hitting, and this is what I like to tell people too, you're hitting 24 different cognitive skills
Yeah.
in a 5 minute build. Really? I mean,
Yeah.
what else are you going
Yeah.
to do that's going to be that effective?
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the changes that happen generationally. So now you have kids who've been raised on iPads, right? And um it's mixed. Some of them got to be super creative building things on Minecraft, and I'm a huge fan of that. But a lot of them watched loads of videos. And so their early childhood experience was not tactile and it was programmed, right? It was programmed by algorithm. It was passive and programmed. And so what you're literally doing is like a deprogramming activity in a 5 minute Lego build, right? And you probably see, like, did you notice some of them struggled at first with those little 5 minute builds? Like some of them, like it
To
wasn't,
be honest with you, I'm gonna, and this is part of the book I'm writing.
yeah,
It's the academically, I want to call them academically strong kids, the
uh-huh,
kids that, and underlying that, it's the kids that played the game of school the best
yeah,
because there's no right answer.
yeah,
So they struggled because they didn't know, they were trying to come up with a solution of what does Mr. Thomas want as an answer, not
mm,
what solves the problem.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I think that's kind of the disconnect. I hope,
yeah,
I see
mm,
between, especially with the mandated tests and devices too. And I'm love tech, right? And I love the computers in the classroom and I love AI and I love all that stuff. But again, like the worksheets and the standardized tests, there's a
yeah,
time and a place.
yeah.
And do you kind of see a push away from that tech piece? Like, putting Chromebooks away, putting
I
iPads away
do.
in the
Yeah.
classroom.
It's really interesting, um, when I got so much pushback when from the ed tech community when I wrote the book Vintage Innovation, right? And so it's the whole idea of embracing the lo-fi and the high tech, embracing the old and the new, doing mashups, but being
Yes.
very intentional. And I was saying like a makerspace is great, but a makerspace needs duct tape and cardboard and Lego bricks and um, nuts and bolts, and like it needs to be hands-on before moving into abstraction. And it was really interesting because back then, like I felt like that was a really like new idea, or I felt like I got a lot of pushback. And now I look around and I see so many teachers. That's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, "Let's put the Chromebooks away. Let's go hands-on. Let's go paper and pencil for this thing." And I'm really I feel really encouraged by that. Like I just I see so many teachers saying, um, let's let the learning drive our tech integration, our AI integration. And I think in the zone of AI in particular, unlike any other tech, teachers have just learned it fast and then also said, what are the pros and cons, and how do we avoid things like cognitive atrophy or academic dishonesty, but also use it as a legit tool. And I have just been so encouraged by the number of teachers I see who are wrestling with the pros and cons of AI in just such a profound way. I mean, I think it gives me a lot of hope, honestly, for our profession that amid all of these changes, so many teachers are just being so incredibly intentional about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, when I came back from the past couple conferences I've been at,
Uh-huh.
I kind of got the takeaway of these teachers are looking for something.
Uh-huh.
They don't know what they're looking for,
Uh-huh.
but they know what they're not looking for.
Yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean?
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like when I did yearbook. It's like, or the newspaper at school, and it's like, what you don't want on there, but you don't know what you want. It's like trying to do a home improvement project
Yeah,
with my
yeah, yeah,
wife.
yeah.
No offense, I love my wife, don't get me wrong, but you don't know what you want to do until you get something and that's not it.
That's not it.
But what you know what I mean? I think we're kind of in that place with the AI piece,
Hmm.
with tech, in the pushing it away a little bit. I think teachers are looking for something
Hmm.
amongst the standardized curriculum.
Yeah.
So how are
Yeah.
you dealing with that standardized curriculum piece? Bringing in some of this authenticity
Yeah.
with somebody that's got this boxed science
It's really
curriculum that
tough.
the school
Yeah.
taught.
Yeah, I think in working with pre-service teachers, I kind of take two approaches. One is, can we find the area that's not boxed, right? Um, so teachers will have very boxed math and language arts curriculum. Can we go authentic in science and social studies? And can we do those really well? So some of it is that, right? Like
Mhm.
find the spaces of permission. The other one is the second strategy that I say is like, can we renovate the curriculum, right? Can we make changes to it, but keep it the same and punch it up a little bit? Like, what permission do you have to make changes from the scripted curriculum? Is it really scripted or is it just boxed? Is it is it boxed with some permission to supplement and to modify? And if you have that permission to supplement and modify, then let's talk about how to do that. Let's talk about how to fix it. And they get really excited about like, oh, I could change the warm up, or oh, I could change this independent practice thing that we're doing, or and once they see that there's some permission there, it's really helpful. And I think that dual approach works well for them. Look, the reality is leadership and policy makes a difference, right? I felt the most permission in my STEM class and in my journalism classes. Like those two, I could make it from scratch. But I also feel like some of the coolest projects I did were still at the same time working within the constraint of a really rigid math curriculum and a really rigid language arts curriculum map, and um, being very clear about what specific standards I had to teach in social studies. And we still did really cool projects, but also activities and things like that. And so I ultimately think that that's where like the teacher creativity piece becomes so critical.
And having a culture at your school too. I mean,
Yeah.
I know how you were, but my school I was very lucky to have administration that was awesome.
Hmm.
And sometimes you just got to ask the question, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to go to admin and say, "Hey, I want to try this."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when admin when administrators will allow you to make mistakes and
Mhm.
really give that permission, you see the innovation happening. It really comes down to that. And and that's why like I was never a school leader, but I
Right.
highly respect when you have phenomenal building level principals who either allow it or outright encourage it. I think that plays such a critical role.
Well, this was a great conversation,
Thank
John.
you.
I
Yeah, it's kind of
mean,
all over the place, but in a good way. Yeah.
we could go on. You know, I'm glad we had this opportunity because it reinforces in myself, John, that
Hmm.
what I'm trying to do is going in the right direction
Yeah.
because I'm not the only one seeing it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very like-minded we are. Um,
Yep.
if somebody wants to connect with you, reach out to you, find out some more information, your books, whatever it is, where can we find you?
Best place to find me is my website. It's spencereducation.com. And then my social media tends to be the same thing. So Instagram is Spencer Education, Facebook, Spencer Education. Um, yeah, I mean, website is probably the best place. So just go to spencereducation.com and you'll find me.
Awesome. I appreciate it. All that stuff we'll put in the show notes so that you can click on it and get there. John, thanks for joining me today. It was a pleasure. Now I got my mind spinning on some other things. It was wonderful.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it.